Hey folks, thanks to the invention of synthesizers and later samplers and other electronic devices, musicians around the globe got their hands on incredible instruments. Tools for creating new, previously unheard of sounds. But have you ever wondered, listening to your favorite hits, how certain sounds are created? And where do they come from? Today, we will discuss the era when the synthesizer market had hundreds of different models with completely different capabilities, and most importantly, each with its signature sound. It was an era when musicians no longer had to rotate dozens of handles. They could just purchase an instrument they liked, press the button with the desired sound, and play. We'll talk about the still awe-inspiring sounds of the 90s and, most importantly, the sound relevant up to this day. This episode is about the instrument and the hits created on it. The instrument and the hits that united several generations and influenced the music of several decades. Promise, it will be exciting. Let's go. How did electronic music come about? It's 1990. A Scottish musician, John Reid, had been performing as a singer with various bands for many years. He finally decided to launch his own project. So he successfully launches it and calls it Nightcrawlers and starts recording music of his own. Beautiful, melodic, soul funk pop, kind of acid jazz, I'd say. So they record their first demos and sign a contract with the Isley label. In 1992, they released their first single, Living Inside a Dream, which hasn't achieved much commercial success. Their next single was Push the Feeling On. You may have heard this title somewhere, right? But probably it had nothing to do with this mid-tempo dance song, right? This could be a perfect song for somebody like George Michael, for instance. So this song hit the US Billboard chart, but made it only to the 80th place. On the one hand, getting into the American chart for a British band, and I'll remind you, Nightcrawlers are from Scotland, was a relative success. On the other hand, for the UK, immersed in raves in the early 90s, such music was too old-fashioned. Hence, in their native country, the song went unnoticed. But since often the key to the commercial success is directly related to modern trance, smart label executives released two club remixes from 20-year-old American DJ Mark Kinchen on the back of the Push the Feeling On CD. And now, let's go into more detail. But before we do, please welcome my good old friend Alex, a Longplay channel producer and co-creator, who is a musician and sound producer himself, so he will help me with this part. One of the distinguishing features of Mark Kinchen's remixes was vocals. He liked to take pieces of the vocal line, cut them into samples, and make a completely new melody out of it. Unfortunately, we failed to find the isolated voice with no instruments, so we'll just show you a few highlights that he cut out for the remix in this song. First of all, we'll take this piece. That's all we need. Let's put it on a separate track. Now, let's move on to the second verse. Yeah, perhaps some of you have already recognized this fragment. But we'll still cut it out, and that's it. There are a few more samples in this song, but 2 are enough to get the idea of what was going on there. The first one sounds like this. The second one goes like this. Now let's move to the instrument mentioned earlier. After all, we said that this episode is not only about hits, it's also about the instrument. The instrument we'll discuss today is Korg M1. It is a Korg synthesizer released in 1988. So here is its virtual version. Korg M1 is not just a synthesizer, in fact, it's a workstation with lots of sounds, samples and presets. We'll talk about it a little later. But the bottom line is that the Korg M1 model allows you to directly record the entire track. You can take the drums, and here you can record the bass on top of them. But first of all, of course, we'll discuss the sounds so familiar to us. The sounds that changed the music. To do this, let's go to the organ section. As you can see, there are plenty of various organ sounds here, like this one, or this one, or this one. Okay, this one too. But this is not exactly what we're talking about today. Now, let's take a preset called Organ 2. This one on top. Sounds like a regular organ, doesn't it? Let's play around with it. Something like this. But if we go a little lower, it will take just a couple of notes to make you go, wow. Next up, we have the bass. In the preset, there's an instrument called organ. The bass, which is conventionally called organ bass. The same organ bass that our 20-year-old hero, Mark Kinchin, was one of the first musicians to use. And of course, let's not forget about the famous melody. I'm sure regarding this remix, unlike the original, many of you have heard it. But even if you haven't, I'm sure this sound is more than familiar to you. And we'll of course get back to it. But did this remix become popular back then in 1992? Nope, not right away. A little later we'll explain when and how. And now, let's move on to a different story. It's 1990, an American singer called Robin Stone is releasing her debut song. Show Me Love. It was written by Alan George and produced by a popular R&B songwriter and keyboard player Fred MacFarlane. It was recorded promptly. Poor Robin had to struggle hard having a sore throat. She was running cold at the time, but still had to record the song because no one was going to wait till she's fully recovered. The song was released via a small British independent label, Champion Records, and no chart results. Just nothing. It went unnoticed. Robin was down and upset about not being able to show off her best vocal skills in the studio. So she breaks up with the label and they part their ways. But 2 years later, a Swedish DJ, Sten Hallström, aka Stonebridge, addressed the Champion label. He was looking for new interesting songs for his remixes, so Champion Records offered him Show Me Love from their catalog. Well, unlike Mark Kinchin, Stonebridge did not cut samples, but he used quite similar technique. So here's the isolated vocals of Show Me Love. Let's add some reverb. Much better now, right? What instruments shall we use with it? Of course, organ bass and synthesizers. Korg M1. Let's add some echo for a better match. And here comes the coolest organ bass riff ever.
I've had more than my share. I'm tired of giving my love and getting nowhere.
At first, Stonebridge's remix of Show Me Love got incredibly popular in clubs, after which the label decided to re-release the song. This time under the title Robin S. Show Me Love. Not as a remix, but as a standalone song. Stonebridge's version went on sale as a separate single. 3 years later, May 8, 1993, the new version of Show Me Love made it to the first place of the Billboard Dance Chart. And a week later, 5th place of the main chart. It became popular for both dance floors and radio stations around the globe. The single sold 600,000 copies in the US alone. At the same time, an even more interesting story occurs. Push the Feeling On by Nightcrawlers, we mentioned them earlier, is becoming more and more noticed in the UK underground scene. But of course, not the original boring version, but the remix with Mark Kinchin's organ bass, signed as MK's Nocturnal Dub, released on the backside of the disc. Hence, here's the same pattern. First, in 1994, the remix is re-released. Then, it made it to the UK chart, and in 1995, 3 years after the original release, Mark Kinchin made a slightly updated version in the same style, and the label released it not as a remix, but as a new song by the Nightcrawlers project. It instantly hits all UK charts, spreads across Europe, gets noticed overseas, and becomes a huge hit, along with the second song from this episode. For the promo, a video was made where, in the photo booth, just like in all the band's concerts, throughout all 4 minutes of the song, John Reid sings just one phrase except for the title line. Their lives again, their lives will pull us. And it can hardly be called lyrics actually, those are just sampled vocals from the original song. John teams up with electronic musicians and backing vocalists to put together a new band. So all of a sudden, 3 years after the original song's release, the unpopular band Nightcrawlers became a fresh, up-to-date, trendy and relevant dance project. But let's get back to the Korg M1 synthesizer. As we have already said, what was great about it, except that it was a whole workstation in which you could record several audio tracks and create whole tracks, Korg M1 came bundled with an infinite number of presets, about 3,000. If we go through each of these presets, we'll definitely find some songs we've encountered before. For example, when Korg turns on, you can hear this beautiful pad. It's called Universe. If I'm not mistaken, Sandra had something like that. Of course, we will not go through all 3,000 of them, but let's touch upon some you may have heard. Let's go to the vocal section and pick one of these presets. Now be honest, who thought it was Depeche Mode? No, it's of course Queen. I'm going slightly mad. Actually, the Innuendo album was almost entirely recorded with Korg M1. But if you really heard something Depeche Mode-ish here, well, you have your reason. Because they also used Korg M1. We can even take the same preset, something like this. Hence, Korg M1 and its sounds are a guide to the music of the late 80s and early 90s. However, the most legendary sounds from this instrument are, first of all, the organ, or rather the organ bass, that we will discuss a bit later, and the piano. It may seem there's nothing unusual about this piano, but let's take a listen. I think just one chord isn't enough, because when you play it, you just wanted more. As you see, this preset is even called M1 house piano. The sound of the Korg M1 is considered to be a standard for the dance music of the 90s. Later, Nightcrawlers failed to do anything bigger than this song. John Reid released new singles on the wave of his success for a couple more years. But eventually the popularity faded away. But this song is of course kind of forever. For a while, house music and all these sounds lost their relevance. But in 2008, there came Bob Sinclair. In 2009, Pitbull recorded a huge hit called Hotel Room Service, based on the same tune. Stromae released Alors on danse, obviously under the same inspiration, which he repeatedly ironically hinted at in his live sets, inserting an instrumental bridge there from time to time. And since then, dozens of songs have been released every year sampling or interpolating what Mark Kinchen played at the time, or just inspired by it. And that video from Africa, where a guy named Mufasa is dancing following the operator's car, went viral. The guy who before that sang us the tune of the song It's Friday, then it's Saturday and Sunday. It's Friday, then it's Saturday, Sunday. So after that, a UK-based DJ Ryden made a crazy popular collaboration of Mufasa with John Reid aka Nightcrawlers. And again, after almost 30 years, the top of all the world charts. As for our hero, Mark Kinchen made hundreds of remixes in his life. In 2009, he withdrew from making remixes and started producing. He worked with Will Smith, Jaden Smith, Pitbull, Beyoncé, and other artists. But at the beginning of the 2010s, with the revival of house music, he returned to the DJ console and is still a relevant, trendy DJ up till now. The leader of Nightcrawlers, John Reid, got back to the top due to the remix made by a young DJ, who, by the way, unlike John, is not even listed as the author of this song on paper and accordingly does not get any royalties for all these re-releases. Yet John Reid is a talented vocalist and his voice was very suitable for such music. And it's worth mentioning that after finishing his collab with Nightcrawlers, he kept creating music and writing songs, many of which turned out to be popular radio hits. As for Robin Stone, the song Show Me Love, well, it's a remix actually, became the main song in her career.
You got to show me love. I don't mind if you sing with me.
After it, she had another club hit, Love for Love,
I'm giving you love.
but all subsequent work came to naught. As for the Korg M1, despite a relatively short life, it was produced from 1988 to 1995, it's rightfully considered the best-selling synthesizer in the world. It's hard to imagine how many hundreds of thousands of copies were sold, and how many songs were written with the help of this instrument or based on the sounds it made available. One of the biggest albums of the year 2022 was Renaissance by Beyoncé. Such an eclectic and at the same time integral record, combining various dance music genres into a continuous DJ set, and one might say, into a historical essay. The album's major hit is Break My Soul. It's one of the top songs of that year, and it sounds like a real love letter to a Korg M1 synthesizer. And again, this is 2022. Fantastic. Let's call it a day for now. We'll be happy to see your comments and thoughts and ideas below the video. I hope it was interesting. Don't forget to subscribe and like this episode. See you in a week. Bye bye.